All right, let's get right into it. We're going to look at some of the most dramatic moments in economic history. I'm talking about major financial crashes. But more importantly, we're going to figure out what these massive events can teach us about our own money. Right here, right now. You hear this all the time, right? People think the financial storm that's brewing in their lifetime is totally different from anything that's ever happened before. And look, it feels that way. The details always change. There's new technology, new fancy financial products, new players on the world stage. But here's the thing. The one secret that history just keeps screaming at us, they're not unique at all. It turns out that financial collapses, whether they're from the 1800s or just a few years ago, follow a surprisingly predictable pattern. And it's all driven by the one thing that never, ever changes: human behavior. So, let's prove it. Okay, let's start with the big one, the most famous crash of them all, the one that kicked off the Great Depression. The Roaring Twenties, it was just one giant party, a decade of incredible optimism and economic boom. But the whole party was being fueled by something incredibly risky. This right here, this was the rocket fuel of the 1920 stock market. Just imagine being able to buy $1,000 worth of stock, but you only have to put down $100 of your own money. It sounds amazing when prices are shooting up, doesn't it? But what you're doing is creating a system that is so fragile, so leveraged, that the second prices start to fall, everything can get wiped out, poof, in an instant. And that is exactly what happened. This stock market crash wasn't just some problem for Wall Street investors. No, it set off a global chain reaction. At its absolute worst, the unemployment rate in the US hit a jaw-dropping 25%. Think about that. 1 out of every 4 people who wanted a job couldn't find one. The consequences were just devastating, and they lasted for years. I know it's a complicated event, but this little analogy just nails the basic idea. You've got an asset, baseball cards, that everyone goes crazy for. You have easy borrowing, in this case, kids are using their lunch money. And then boom, there's a sudden reality check, panic sets in, and the whole thing crashes. Honestly, that's the 1929 stock market in a nutshell. So now let's fast forward almost 80 years. We're jumping to a crisis that many of us actually remember, maybe even lived through: the 2008 global financial crisis. And this time the obsession wasn't stocks. It was something that felt so much safer: our own homes. This was basically the financial weapon of mass destruction in 2008. In the early 2000s, it felt like banks were just handing out home loans to pretty much anyone, even people who had no job or no savings. These incredibly risky loans were called subprime, and they didn't just stay in a few banks. They ended up flooding the entire global financial system. And you can see right here how the whole thing came apart. See, the banks didn't just hold on to these risky loans. Oh no, they bundled them up into these super complex products and then sold them to investors all over the world who were told they were perfectly safe. But when people inevitably started failing to pay their mortgages, the entire house of cards just collapsed, leading to the absolute shock of Lehman Brothers going bankrupt. And again, just like with the baseball cards, this makes it so easy to understand. You take something that should be simple, a home loan, and you make the system so complicated and so interconnected that when one little part of it fails, it threatens to bring down everyone who owns even a tiny piece of the action. Okay, on to our final case. This is one that you've probably never even heard of, but you could argue it's the blueprint for all the others: the Long Depression, which all started with the Panic of 1873. This one sentence is the key to understanding the whole 1873 crash. Railroads back then, they were the internet. They were this transformative, world-changing technology. Everyone believed they would connect continents and create wealth beyond your wildest dreams. And just like we see with New Tech today, investors went into an absolute frenzy, just pouring insane amounts of money into building them. But when it became obvious that a lot of these railroad projects were just never going to be profitable, the bubble popped. And the fallout wasn't just some quick recession. Nope. It was a grueling, miserable, long depression that, in some parts of Europe and North America, dragged on for over 2 decades. It caused unbelievable unemployment and social unrest. So, there we have it. 3 massive crashes, separated by decades, all centered on completely different things: railroads, stocks, and houses. On the surface, they seem totally unrelated. But now, let's connect the dots and reveal the hidden blueprint they all share. Honestly, this is the most important question we can possibly ask. Because if we can really get a handle on the common ingredients, we can start to learn how to spot the warning signs in our own time. And here it is. This is basically the five-act play of almost every single financial bubble in history. It starts with real excitement about some new opportunity. Then, easy money, cheap credit floods the system, which fuels pure speculation. Prices totally detach from reality until, inevitably, something happens to shatter the illusion and the whole system resets violently. Now this is what's so cool. This chart maps our three case studies perfectly onto that five-step blueprint. Just look at it. The asset changes. It goes from railroads to stocks to housing, and the type of easy money evolves. But the core steps, excitement, speculation, reality hits, and the reset, they are identical. It's the same story, just with a different cast of characters. So, okay, this is the crucial part, right? What do we do with this information? How can knowing this historical pattern help us make smarter decisions with our own money and just navigate the world today and tomorrow? Well, history boils it all down to a few timeless truths. First, and we've seen this in every single case, debt is the amplifier. It's what turns a small problem into a total catastrophe. Second, just be skeptical. When you see intense, widespread excitement, that almost always creates a bubble. And finally, patience. The investors who make it through are the ones who avoid the panic and think for the long term. And, this might be the most valuable lesson of all to pass on to the next generation. Just understanding that the economy and markets move in cycles, they don't go in straight lines, is so fundamental. It teaches you to be resilient when times are bad, and it teaches you to be cautious when times are good. Which brings us to our final and maybe our most important takeaway from this whole journey through financial history. And this just sums it up perfectly. The machinery of finance, the systems, they're always changing. We get new technologies, new regulations, new investment products. That stuff is always evolving. But the operator of that machine, us, human beings, we don't really change. Our collective psychology, driven by greed, by fear, and by that incredibly dangerous phrase, "this time it's different," that's the constant engine behind the cycle of boom and bust. So I'll just leave you with this thought. Now that you know the five-step blueprint, look at the world around you. Where do you see that combination of excitement, easy money, and soaring prices? Because understanding the past doesn't just make us smarter, it gives us a lens to see the future a little more clearly.